Hello, Teresa. How are you?
Hi, Simon. Yeah, I'm all right. Thanks. How are you?
Very well indeed. Welcome to the Inspiral podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the subject of menopause, the realities. What might be one thing from this conversation that you think that you would like someone to take from it at the end?
I'd like it to give them the courage to stand up for themselves, to fight for themselves. Maybe that's perhaps not the right terminology, but like menopausal women are often dismissed as being irrelevant by bosses, GPs, colleagues, and the problem with menopause is that it knocks your confidence. So I'd really like people to go, actually, I'm going to stand up for myself and I'm not going to let them treat me like that. And I'm not going to just let it go. Does that make sense? I
Makes
just,
complete sense.
yeah, yeah. Just to give people a bit of confidence that actually they're in the right and they shouldn't be treated badly or walked over or, thought of as irrelevant.
Yeah, I agree. And what might people or the listeners find interesting to know about you? Just give us a 10, 20-second snapshot of Teresa, which might gain context.
Okay, so I'm married and I have two children. One is neurodivergent. I recently retired, took early retirement in September because I'd had enough of being at work, basically, and being treated badly for various reasons. And now I'm happy living my life and
Mm.
doing the things that I enjoy. I've just trained to become a celebrant, so I'm looking forward to starting that new journey and doing these podcasts as well. I find that really exciting. Helping other people is what really makes my day.
Teresa, there's something about you where the gloves come off and the title of this, which is The Lady of a Certain Age, which really gets people, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It gets under the skin because it's a label and it's a preconceived way that people might consider. You've heard it before in the past personally and
Mm.
and in and around the workplace. Why do you think that, by your own admission, people become invisible, not through any fault of your own, but through maybe something in society? And how has that demonstrated itself with you?
I think so. The first time somebody used that term for me, I'd recently moved house, moved to a new area, so new doctors. Wasn't feeling great. I was putting on weight. Couldn't understand why. I was mid-40s. I had pain in my hip. I was really tired all the time. Um, I couldn't sleep. I was like really sort of stiff when I got up in the morning. Lots of different things. And I went to the doctor and I was like, I'm not right. It's not right. There's something going on and it's not right. And he looked at me and he went, well, you are a woman of a certain age. And I looked at him and I said to him, I'm telling you, there is something wrong. There is something wrong with me. And it's got nothing to do with my age. There's too many other things going on. And he just went, oh, well, it's the menopause and, basically you just got to get on with it. And I was so angry and I got really upset. And when I'm really angry, I start to cry, unfortunately, sometimes. And I just left. I was just like, I just walked out of there anyway. And I went home and I said to my husband about it. And he went, just go back again, go and see a woman doctor. Anyway, when I went back, there was something wrong with me. I had an underactive thyroid. And if I'd have listened to him, and walked away and not done anything, that could have had serious consequences for me because I needed medication for the rest of my life. Um, and but that really made me so angry and upset. But I couldn't get my words out to say to him, "How dare you say that to me?" And I think a lot of women feel like that. And funnily enough, I never went to see that doctor again. And years later, about 10 years later, I had to go and see him for something else because he was the only doctor that dealt with that. And he made some comment about it. And I said to him, well, I said, after you told me I was a woman of a certain age, I said, that was it for me. And there was a nurse in the room and she went, oh, "You didn't say that to her." And he went, "Oh, did I?" And she really had to go at him. And she said, "How dare you say that to a woman?" And he did apologise and everything. But do you know what I mean? It just made me feel this big. Like my problems weren't important. I was a woman of a certain age. I just hate that terminology. And I've heard it so many times at work as well. Not necessarily directed at me, but certainly other women. And I've overheard people saying it. If a colleague's having a bit of a bad day or something, oh well, she's a woman of a certain age. And you just think it's so dismissive. It's like, if I said that about him, oh, well, he's a man of a certain age, it would be, people wouldn't be happy about it. They would say something. But unfortunately, when you're menopausal as well, it knocks your confidence, so you're not always in the right place to say something about it. Sorry, go on,
Interesting.
you was going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say I've never thought about being called a man of a certain age until you just said it then. And I felt boxed. I felt over the hill. I felt a bit invisible. I felt like
Yeah.
my identity, like you've already made up my identity and everything that I think about myself
Yep.
is worthless. That's really, really interesting. I mean, you didn't say anything at the time because of the reasons you've said, and you were taken aback. So naturally, we don't, because you can't quite realize what's going on.
Yeah.
Had you been the now,
Mm.
what would you
Oh,
say?
if you'd have said that to me now, if I'd have gone in and he said to me, "You're a woman of a certain age," I'd say to him, "Don't you dare say that to me. How rude, how belittling, how dare you? You're trying to make me feel this big. You're putting me in a box and you're telling me that, oh, just because I'm a woman of a certain age, I'm irrelevant. My problems aren't important." You know, he dismissed me. It is very dismissive. And like I say, as it turned out, I did actually have a medical problem that wasn't anything to do with menopause. And, which is a really bad thing for a doctor to be doing. It was that whole menopause is not important. You've got to suck it up and get on with it. And that was his whole attitude, was not his problem. Basically, he wanted me out of there. It's just, yeah, I would never stand for that now. In my previous role, I used to do lots of different webinars and things, and I used to do stuff about menopause. And just not long before I left my job, before I retired, about a week before I'd actually done a webinar around menopause, and this lady in the chat had put that she was 60, and her GP had said, "Oh well, I think you should come off of HRT now because you're 60." And I typed in the chat and I went, "So what's that got to do with anything? Why have you got to come off when you're 60?" And she said, "Oh, well, because the GP said." And I went, "There are women I know of women who are in their 80s that are still on HRT, you know, because some women, I can't remember what the percentages are, but some women will have menopause symptoms for the rest of their lives. So why would you come off HRT? I'm staying on HRT for the rest of my life. As far as I'm concerned, that's it." But and I ended up having this sort of chat with her afterwards. She emailed me, and she ended up. I got the last message. I was going on holiday, and the last message was, "I spoke to my GP, and I've told him under no circumstances am I coming off of HRT." Yes, excellent. It's just weird the way things are and the way you're treated, and it's really, I would always fight for other women. I will always, we need to sort of help each other and boost each other's confidence. And, and going back to what you said about this, that's what I want people to get out of it. I want people to go, "Yeah, I'm going to do that. I'm going to fight for myself," and I want other women to fight for other women.
Do you think that women talking about the menopause, obviously, understandably, as a collective, will help and support each other? But judging from what you've said in that doctor's surgery, don't you think men need to be involved in this conversation as well?
Oh my
Is there a
God,
misunderstanding?
absolutely. Absolutely. Because menopause affects every single person on this planet one way or another. So obviously the women that are going through it, if you've got a daughter, You know, if you're a man and you've got a daughter or a wife or a sister or a granddaughter, or do you know what I mean? It just affects everybody. And also, you know, men can suffer from male menopause, which can be called andropause. So it's a similar sort of thing because testosterone levels dip, which means that they will get hot flushes and memory fog and stuff like that. But it's everybody as well, you know. And if you're transitioning, you know, and you might be, you know, having tablets to reduce your testosterone levels, you'll be getting it. But you might be, you know, still having those levels, but you're transitioning, and it affects, you know, like sorry, I'm having a menopause moment. Can't think of the term. So gender dysphoria. So it can, you know, it can make that worse as well, because if you're transitioning into a man, but you're still having menopause symptoms, you know, that's very difficult. It's very hard, and I think people don't really think about things like. I mean, I'm not an expert by any means. I'm not saying I am, but
You're an expert in
you
your
know,
own journey.
yeah. Well,
And,
yeah,
and
yeah.
and this is what we can talk about. And we talk about, you know, the purpose of this podcast is the moments that make you hide.
Mm,
Menopause, I've got a few friends who are going through the menopause. Now, I know from what they tell me privately is not what they would tell other people publicly, a persona that's fine, and
mm.
they get they're demonstrating the results of the symptoms of what they're going through, but they very rarely would talk about it. What makes people almost hide the men? Why isn't it as open a subject?
Because it's seen as not important. It's seen as something that, you know, women have always had to go through, so you just need to get on with it. It's seen as a weakness. Um, you know, it's that we're sort of brought up, aren't we, to not give in. And, you know, oh, I'm not well, but I'm going to battle on and I'm going to get on with it. And, you know, and everything's fine. And you've got this persona that you have to show, especially in work as a professional. You know, you have this professional persona that you have to show all the time. And it's sort of seen as, I don't know, and I think that people don't realise just how bad it can be. You know, I'm relatively lucky. I only really had hot flushes at night. I did have a bit of brain fog, but medication has sort of eventually sorted that out for me. But there are women who have a hot flush that it's like they've just stepped in the shower. You know, in 30 seconds, they will be absolutely drenched. Their hair will be dripping. Their clothes will be sopping. You know, and that is, if you work in a professional environment and you have that happen to you, what is that going to do to you? You know, that's just going to be awful. But it's that, and it's always somebody else's problem. You know, you got a male boss. I will just get on with it. You know, well, if you need to go and get changed, go and get changed. Or perhaps you need to reduce your hours, or perhaps you need to change your job, or because it's too difficult. And these days as well, everything is, people are meaner now. I keep saying this. I just find that people
I agree.
don't seem to care as much, and it's very much people are so busy. They're so under pressure. It's always, you know, short staff, get the job done. Da, da, da. But what they forget is that if you treat your staff badly, they become disengaged, disillusioned, don't want to help, don't want to go that extra mile. Um, so in the long term, by understanding and being kind to your staff and actually learning about what their problems are, you're actually going to do yourself a favour and get more work out of them. But
So many
that's a different
people
story.
go through the menopause. It shouldn't
Yeah,
be, I know in an ideal world, it shouldn't be something that shame and guilt is attached to it, because it's like,
no, but
you
it
know,
is.
walking across the road. But
Mm,
this is the reason. If shame and guilt are attached to it, people then retract into themselves, don't talk about it. It then
yeah,
comes out in other ways of irritability
yeah,
towards the other half or at work,
yeah,
which then creates a downward spiral because people have something to pin it on. They've seen
yeah.
something that they can pin behaviors on. Whereas with menopause, they can't actually see
Mm.
it. So with it being driven behind the scenes, how does that feel? How does it feel to have
Um,
to pretend that it might be something that because you can't actually say it?
it's horrendous. actually. I know someone very senior who, very capable woman, really outgoing, really good at a job, you know, very highly thought of, ended up leaving because of the menopause. She wouldn't go for a promotion because she was worried about how she'd be in interview. She didn't want people talking about her. You know, she'd been in that profession for 30 years. Her persona was very important, and she didn't want to talk about it because people would look down on her and they would judge her. And she left. She resigned because she just couldn't take it anymore. You know, and it did affect her home life. She split up with her partner. I think they sorted it out in the end, but do you know what I mean? It was tough for him as well because she couldn't. It's always the same thing, isn't it? You take it out on those that are closest to you, and you don't, you know, and you can't explain it. It's almost like if I've got to explain, then you're not listening, you're not paying attention, which is completely irrational, really.
Mhm.
But when you're in that sort of frame of mind, there's nothing really you can do about it. You know, you might logically in the back of your head be going, don't behave like that, don't do that because that's really wrong. But you can't stop yourself because you feel so awful. And yeah, if people at work just aren't listening, and if you work, you know, I worked in a very male dominated organization. And so that's quite difficult as well, you know, especially as a female. Um, you know, like this person who I'm talking about, you know, that was really hard for her because there was nobody at her level that understood or that she could go to, you know, so that's very difficult.
To take this to the extreme, I've had friends who have contemplated their own lives
Mm,
because of this, and maybe some conflicts with medication or given the right medication, the lack of sleep, severe anxiety and depression.
yeah,
When we talk about those things, they seem to be so much more acceptable to talk about
yeah.
nowadays, but all of that's wrapped up in the word uh, menopause. Do people, I say men, but do people in general know that this can lead to people taking their own lives?
No, I don't think they do. I don't think they do. I think it's it's something that has been kept quietly, you know, kept quiet for years, and it was always, you know, um, oh, she's at that time of life, or do you know what I mean? Or she's going through the change. That was the one that, you know, when I was a kid, that was what my mum used to say, and my aunts and that, oh, like she's going through the change. And I used to think, what's that then? You know, um, it's something that we need to be teaching our kids about when they're in school. You know, they have sex education, but they don't talk about menopause. You know, and it's something that should be normalised. Talking about it. You know, some people sail through it, don't have a problem. Other people, it is the worst experience of their life, and it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop after 10 years or 20 years. Or you know what I mean? It's constant, and it does ruin relationships, and it does make you depressed, and it does, you know. And if you're, you know, say you're going through the menopause, you've got teenage children and you're looking after old elderly parents. Oh my God, can you imagine how awful it must be? How must it must drag you down? And those things just aren't publicised. You know, it's not spoken about. And things are getting better because more people are talking about menopause. But you know, a lot of this stuff needs to be like training in companies and that. It needs to be mandatory. You
People
know,
even know what it is. And
sorry,
I don't say this loosely, but do you think people even know what it is? Because the word can
no.
sum up preconceived ideas of it, but break it down.
I think that they hear menopause, they go, oh, hot flushes, can't remember what they're talking about, and that's it. You know, they don't talk about. So I had severe hip pain, you know, which was menopause related. I didn't realise that at the time. It was so bad. If I sort of knelt down on the floor to pick something up, or whatever, I was screaming trying to get up. I could not get up off the floor. The pain was so bad. I spent months, you know, I'd be asleep and I'd just constantly wake myself up because every time I turned over, I'd be like, oh, the pain was so bad to the point where my daughter went, Mum, can you just go and do something about it, please? Because you're keeping me awake at night as well, you know, because I'm like moaning and groaning all through the night. And it was just, I didn't know that that had anything to do with menopause. My sister had a frozen shoulder for 2 years. That was to do with the menopause. All of those sorts of things you don't know anything about. It was only when I started to look more into it that I found out all this additional information, and because it's not really publicised, it's not, um, and like the other thing, so you can have like cold flashes as well. So some people have that. So they're like icy cold. I never knew that was a thing. There's so many different aspects of it, and it's just not talked about. I mean, there are companies out there that are doing different things
Hmm.
and getting the word out there, and it's brilliant. Um, but and that was one of the things I was going to say. So I went on so the organisation that I worked in, I went. They did some menopause seminars. This was quite a long time ago, probably about 10 years ago, and they were really good. So uh, it's a clinic that lots of menopausal women probably would have heard of, but I won't say it. But they're really good. And it was people from that clinic who came and did a talk, and they were doing a manager's one. And I said to my manager at the time, who was in his 30s, I said to him, "You should go on that." And he said, "Well, no, why would I want to go on it?" I said to him, "Because you've got 4 women staff that are in their late 40s, early 50s. So this affects us." I said, "And you're married." I said, "So at some point, your wife's going to be going through it and you need to understand." And he just went, "Oh, yeah, ha, ha, ha," and walked off. Didn't do it, didn't go on it. And that's like, that's the unfortunately prevailing attitude. I don't know if it is so much now, but it certainly was then. And it's, like I say, it's improving, but it's not improving enough, I don't think.
No, and not quickly
It
enough.
no.
Psychologically, how do you feel with it all happening? And I say that because a frozen shoulder in isolation is one thing, sleep deprivation in isolation is another thing. How
Mm.
do you deal with the accumulative effect of it all happening at a time where you don't really know what's going on yourself and the label doesn't do it justice?
It's really hard. It's really hard because you think you're going mad. You think that you've got Alzheimer's starting on, like early onset dementia or whatever, because there's so many different things going on. It's like I would be doing something one day, that's fine, and then I'd go back to do it the next day, and I think, I don't know how to do this, but I knew how to do it yesterday, so why don't I know how to do it today? And then the next day I'd go, "Oh, I know how to do it today. What's that about?" So you think you're going mad, or you would just talk, and then you'd be saying something, and literally the next word would you'd just go, I don't even know what I was talking about. I don't know what I was going to say, and I can't even remember what I was talking about. And people look at you like, and especially if you're in a meeting, it's horrible. I mean, I've got to the point. I'd be in meetings, and I would, and mainly men in the meetings. I'm sorry, I don't mean I'm not men bashing. I'm just, this is just what happened for me. Um, and and I'd stop and I'd go, "Oh, sorry, menopause moment," and you could see them all go, "Oh, she said menopause. Oh my God," and it was, and they were horrified because they were like, "Oh my God, I've got to acknowledge it now. I've got to, you know," and I was at that point in my life, don't really care. I'll talk about it, and but yeah, but lots of people really, it is very, very scary. And if your family don't understand, my husband didn't understand. It was like, "Oh well, you're just saying that." No, I'm not saying that. This is how it is for me. I've got one of my daughters is neurodivergent. Didn't really get it either. Thought I was making an excuse when I'd say, because she'd say something to me, and I'd go, "I don't remember that at all." I'd forget whole conversations. I still do it now sometimes, and I'm on medication. But and it's just, and sometimes I would cry because I would just think, I can't get my brain to work anymore. Why can't I remember things? Why does my body hurt so much? I'm not sleeping. It's just, yeah, and the anxiety. Oh my God, I've not really suffered a lot with anxiety. When I was younger, as a child, I did a bit, but as I got older and I had my children and that, became a lot more confident. Anxiety, bolt out of the blue. just knocked me for six, you know.
What sort? What type? What were some of the racing thoughts? I know anxiety can come in different shape or form. It can be dramatic, and it can be absolutely as if you can't escape. It can be frenetic, and it can be like you're right
Yeah.
at the end of your tail. Did it vary?
Yeah, it could be something really stupid. You know, we had like an inspection going on at work, and we had to do lots of collate different information and everything. And my boss said to me, "Oh, can you do this?" So I went, "Yeah, okay, no problem." I looked at it for days, and I was like, "I don't know how to do this. I don't know what to do." Which is not me at all. I will always go, "Yeah, I can do that, no problem." And if I can't do it, I'll Google it. I'll go and ask someone. I'll, find out how to do it. I was like, I can't tell anybody that I can't do it. And the anxiety was just building and building and building. And this went on for 5 days. And I spent all weekend worrying about it. And I couldn't sleep. I was in such a state about it. I couldn't eat. I felt sick all the time. It was just awful. And in the end, I thought, I'm going to have to say something. And I texted my boss and I said to him, can I talk to you? Because we was working at home. This was like during COVID as well. So we were working at home. And he went, yeah, no problem. And we had a Teams meeting, and I just burst into tears. And he went, oh my God, what's the matter? I went, I can't do that. I can't do that thing that you want me to do. I don't know how to do it. And it was like, blah, 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 and all this stuff came out, all these words came out. And he was like, seriously, don't worry about it. I'll get somebody else to do it. Don't worry about it. And he said, have you been really panicking about it? I said, yeah, I have. I've said, I've not slept. I've not ate. And he was like, just don't worry about it. But I worked myself up into such a state. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't, like, every time my husband said something to me, I just bit his head off. And the kids, I was like, just leave me alone. Don't talk to me. Even my poor dog, I was like, I can't even take the dog out for a walk. So, it just consumed me. I've never had anything like it. It was so awful. And I am a problem solver. I will always find a solution. I'll go, right, well, we'll try this. And if that doesn't work, and I'm really laid back about stuff like that. So it just wasn't me at all. It was horrendous, and I couldn't tell anybody, it was just awful. I couldn't tell my colleagues who I was really close to. I couldn't confess to them about it because I thought they'll think I'm stupid or I'm an idiot, and I'm overreacting. And, you get all of those thoughts in your head, and then it's like, oh my God, what am I going to do? I'm going to lose my job. They're gonna sack me. They're going to suspend me. They're going to discipline me. They're going to, do you know what I mean? It was all those sorts of things. And looking back, it's really stupid, but that was how I felt at the time.
When you just asked, do you know what I mean? I can sense in your voice and the way you were, I can sense the panic that something worked once, now it's not working. What's broken? The deep fear and the worry in trying to isolate what is happening, the downward trajectory that you're thinking it used to it, the panic. And at that point, it sounds scary.
Yeah, it was. I was terrified. I thought I was losing my mind, because that's just not me. I don't worry about stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll just ask so-and-so to help me with that or whatever. And I just couldn't. I'd got myself into such a state. It was horrible. It was horrible. And, I think that was probably the worst I'd ever been. But I still panic and have anxiety over silly things that I shouldn't be anxious
Yeah,
about
it
at all.
creeps up, doesn't it? Sometimes anxiety,
Yeah.
the weirdest of things, it just appears.
Yeah.
Now, at that point, when you were really low, I can sense, do you know what? I can sense the valve came off. There was some pressure release when someone said, don't worry about it, talk to me, tell me about it, we'll accommodate, etc. At that very point, if someone had said, look, I kind of understand, but this does need to be done. What would have happened to your state?
I would have lost it completely. I would have lost it completely. I wouldn't have been able to. I think I would have just curled up in a ball on the floor and not been able to cope with it because I just didn't know what to do. And I was so scared because it wasn't me. You know, that's not how I behave. That's not how my thought process works. And yeah, if he'd have said to me, well, you just need to get on and do it, well, I would have ended up, I probably would have got off sick and then I would have resigned, I reckon, because
I mean, I
I just wouldn't have known what to do. Yeah.
can feel how you would have had to do it, because by the sound of it, there's no other option. You can't
No,
just get over it. You can't
no.
pull your socks up. You can't get through it. It'll be all right doesn't count. You'll be fine doesn't work. This requires a deep understanding, doesn't it?
Yeah. 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 It was just awful. Um, you know, when I think back, actually, I haven't really thought about that since then. But thinking back, I can remember just how scared I was, and my stomach was churning, and I thought I was going to be sick. And it was just, and I was just thinking, what if he says I've just, like you say, what if he says I've just got to do it? What if he doesn't understand? What if he thinks I'm overreacting? What if he thinks, he thinks I'm being stupid? And but the thing is, my boss at the time was such a lovely man. He was very supportive, and I could go and talk to him about anything, and he was really kind. Do you know what I mean? So he he wouldn't have reacted like that. If I'd have been able to think about it logically, I would have known that he would have been fine about it. But because it's not rational, is it? Anxiety. I mean, if anxiety was rational, we'd all be all right, wouldn't we? But it's not rational, so you dread all of those things that aren't going to happen. You know. So it's just, yeah, it was just awful.
Yeah, no, about
It's really awful.
92% of things we fear that's going to happen never happen to us. But that at
Mm,
the time, that stat
yeah,
is irrelevant, because what
yeah,
I think, and quite authentic about my past as well and my mental health journey, whatever you think is real at the time is real
mm,
because it's in you. And anxiety, it affects you physiologically as well, and your body reacts
yeah,
to it. So if your body reacts to it, it must be real. You go
yeah,
into complete lockdown because you're trying to protect yourself, and like you say, you can't hear anything. Yours was
mm,
at work.
yeah,
It could also be any minor thing, couldn't it? It could be going to the
yeah,
shops. It could be going to see a mother, or it could be going to see an event,
yeah,
and you just can't do it. You physically and
yeah.
mentally cannot do it because you're
Oh
trapped
yeah.
inside this world of anxiety.
I've walked out of the supermarket and left all my shopping in the trolley,
Hmm.
because I don't even know why. It's perfectly fine. Walk around the supermarket, get my shopping, everything was okay. And all of a sudden it was like this dread. Um I don't know what caused it. And I stood there and I remember just looking around, thinking, I can't be here anymore, can't be here anymore, can't do this, can't do it, can't do it, can't do it. Literally, look, just ran out of the supermarket, got in my car, locked all the doors, and just sat there like this.
You know how many
You
people are
know,
going to
for
relate to
like,
that?
yeah,
Do you know how
just
many
like,
people are going to relate to that feeling of having pins and needles in your
yeah.
ears, everything consuming
Oh,
you?
I still don't know what caused it. I was fine. I was just walking around the supermarket, buying my shopping, and all of a sudden I just had to get out of there as quickly as possible. I just left my trolley and just ran to the car. It was horrible. I mean, and then I was like, like this, sitting in the car for a few minutes, and then eventually I calmed down, and then I was like, "Oh, you stupid idiot," But I couldn't go back in the shop to go and find my trolley. I just drove off and went home, you know. But it just, but I don't know where it came from. But it's all of these things about menopause that they don't tell you about, and then you go to the GP and they try and fob you off. Go to the
You've
GP.
segmented perfectly. Right. So you're going through all this. You've no idea what's happening to you because there's no
Mm,
education at school. There's a label that you see everyone referring to. You don't quite fit in that box because no one told me
mm,
about all this other stuff. We are advised to go to our GP and reach out. You've done that. We're talking about this line of being invisible all the way through and people not really
mm.
identifying with you. What happened? The GP, I've got all these symptoms.
So So I did take, so for quite a long time, I took like herbal supplements, which did help quite a bit actually. But eventually it got to the point where they just didn't work anymore. And I thought, right, I'm going to have to go on HRT. And so I was 56. So I'd probably been going through perimenopause and menopause for, I don't know, 8 years or something like that. And so I thought, right, it's no good. I'm going to go to the doctors and I'm going to go on HRT. So I sat down, woman doctor. So I thought, oh, that's all right. I've seen her before. She's very nice. It'll be fine. So I said, oh, I want to go on HRT. I've used herbal supplements, but they're not really working for me anymore. Terrible hot flashes at night. Like, I'm so hot. I feel like I'm going to self-combust, brain fog, blah, 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 pain. I had the pain in my hip came back and, all this. Anyway, so she went, well, you're a bit old to start on HRT. And I went, sorry? So she went, well, you're a bit old. And I went, no, I'm not. I
Wow.
said, I'm 56. Yeah. So she went, well, that's a bit old. I went, no, it isn't. I said, there are women in their 80s. So I'd done my research
Mm.
beforehand, right? Because I thought, I'm not leaving this doctor's surgery without HRT. And I went, there are women in their 80s still on HRT. I went, my age got nothing to do with it. I said, you can still put me on. She was like, oh, well. And then she started reeling out all these facts and figures. And there's a report, and I can't remember all of it now, but there's a report and they say about how it's an increased risk of, there's an increased risk of breast cancer. But in that report, I think that's that one, in that report, they don't take into account women who drink alcohol or women who are overweight or women who don't exercise or, whatever. So I'm 56 years old, right? So I don't smoke. I don't drink. I'm not overweight. I do HIIT training 4 times a week. I walk miles. So I'm pretty fit,
Mhm.
and I think that I'm pretty low risk for, all of these things. So I say all this to her and she's like, oh, well. And then she comes out with something else. And like I said, I can't remember all the details now, but I remember going, well, they've disproved that report. I said, so you need to get your facts right, and then she said something else. And I was like, well, that's not true either because blah, 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 and, and it sort of went on and on and on. In the end, like she stopped talking to me and she started doing something. I went, what are you doing? And she went, I'm writing your prescription for HRT. Because I think she just wanted to get rid of me because I just sat there going, well, that's not right and that's not true. And you've got that wrong and you've got that, and I'd made it perfectly clear I wasn't leaving that surgery until I got HRT prescription, and, but she did not want to give me that HRT. It was only because I made a nuisance of myself and I was like being really bullshit. Otherwise, I wouldn't have got it. I've got friends who gone into the GP. Oh, well, have some antidepressants. I'm not depressed. I want HRT. Oh, yes, but antidepressants, blah, blah. No, because I'm not depressed. I'm menopausal and I want HRT, but the amount of women that walk out there with antidepressants because the menopause has sapped their confidence so much that they just go, oh, okay, then, because they, we're taught to trust our GPs, aren't we? We're taught to go, oh, well, the GP knows what they're talking about, so we'll listen to what they say. So if they say have antidepressants, but it doesn't work for everybody. I'm not saying it doesn't work for anybody, but if you want HRT, just blooming give them HRT,
Because
It might.
I've heard this from you and from other people. What would your advice be to someone sitting there who is low on confidence? Because it hugely affects self-esteem. You don't know what you're asking for or how to ask it and how you come across. But if you know that you need it and like you
Mm.
were, what's your advice to someone to stick to their guns?
Take someone with you. Take someone with you who will go, well, no, actually, they want this. Why aren't you? Who will speak up for you? Because then that would then give you the confidence to then say, well, no, actually, yes, I do want that. Because you've got someone sitting next to you that knows that you're doing the right thing and that believes in you. So that's a real boost. So I would always say, take someone with you that is going to back you up and be your cheerleader. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and sort of help you fight for what you should have.
And then what happened?
You know.
How was the realization that you were right and that actually it was working for you?
Oh, it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. It sometimes, doesn't work straight away and they might need to change the medication. But for me, it actually worked really well straight away. Made a huge difference really quickly within a few weeks. And it was amazing. You know, it was just, I felt like me again, you know, because I'd become, even when I was taking the herbal supplements and they were helping, I still wasn't really me.
Mhm.
And, and there were still bits of me that weren't right. And the HRT has really helped with that. I've become me again. You know, I still get a bit of brain fog, and I still have the occasional hot flush, but it's like 5 seconds and it's gone, you know. And and I still, you know, my hip still twinges occasionally, but exercise helps with that as well. Um, you know, I still get anxiety, but I've learned to recognize when the anxiety is coming on. I can see the signs now. So I mean, I did go counselling and everything because that's really helped. But I can see the signs. I can recognise it now. Go on, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I am, because it's so interesting. Recognizing the signs as you're walking into the supermarket, or a lot of people do it
Yeah.
driving along. It's a bully, isn't it? Anxiety. It picks on you when
Mm,
you're weakest and says, you know, you're driving
yeah.
along, you're in the middle lane, a lot could go wrong here. And you're thinking, a
Yeah.
minute ago, I was just singing to a song. Now I'm in the middle lane, like with this foot. Where does
Mm,
that come from? And what are those
mm,
signs that when it starts going, I will say, now, because I've been through a lot over the years, I will say, not now. I'm not listening to you now. I'm really not.
mm,
But then I find it can chip away, and it. If I tell someone, if we were talking now and I was feel anxious about
mm,
this recording, for example, if I told you I feel anxious about this recording, it would go, right, well, I've told you to be quiet and keep it our little secret. You haven't. You've told someone, you've exposed the bully, and it sort of goes.
mm.
But if
Yeah.
I don't say anyone, it thrives. It thrives on me not
Yeah.
being able to say
Yeah.
anything.
Yeah. So for me, I know when it's coming because I start to procrastinate. So normally, so I'm a doer. So I'll go, oh, I've got this job to do. I'm going to go and do it now. But when my anxiety's starting, my brain goes, oh, don't do that now. Do that later. So I think, oh, I'll go and do that. Oh, no. Oh, I don't do that. Do that. Because what it wants me to do, it wants me to curl up on the sofa and be, you know, oh, I can't do anything.
It's mercy.
And then, yeah.
Mm.
And so I either um, go and talk to someone about it and go, well, I'm feeling really anxious about this, blah, 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 you know. So my sister's quite good because she suffers from anxiety as well. So she really gets it. So I'll text her because she's, you know, she might be working or whatever. And then she'll text me back. So we have like a little text conversation and then that helps me. Or I go out for a walk, get my dog, come on, and off we go for a walk. And the other really good thing is I get in my car and I drive somewhere and I turn my music up as loud as I can possibly bear it. And then I sing along. I'm not singing, I'm screaming.
Mhm.
So then I scream along to the music. And after about 10 minutes, I'm okay again. So it's took me a
I think I
long
saw you on the
time.
M25 recently.
Probably go on the M25 quite a lot.
Oh.
But yeah, but I do, you know, and it's and when and sometimes I don't often get it when I'm driving. I'm normally okay with driving because, which is lucky really, because I do drive quite a lot of places. Um, but what I do is I have my music on and I dance in the car. And I know that people are going, "Oh my God, look at that mad woman dancing in the car," but it helps me, you know. But music is I find music's really good with anxiety. Like listening to music really helps for me. And funnily enough, I was on a course recently and we was talking about anxiety there, and lots of the people there said the same thing about music. Music really helps. So I
And
don't know.
anyone
It
listening,
works for me.
that's going to be a great tip. And just
Mm,
telling someone, I mean, the word has become so socially accepted now, anxiety. It's, you know, people can say anxy, whatever you want.
yeah.
But I think if someone did say, whoa, you know, there are other ways of saying, if you don't want to say the word
Mm,
anxiety, but I'm completely overwhelmed, or, you know, just give me
yeah.
a minute. I'm not really, I
Mm,
collect my thoughts. But I think just venting in a slightest form can help expose the
yeah.
bully and then carry on.
And the other thing is, um, and it's took me a while to get to this point as well, but to just say, if you're I don't know, like if I was at work or something and I was having an issue, I would, well, maybe, I don't know if I would do it at work actually, because I'm not, I don't know, but maybe, but I have said it to other people and I can feel it coming on and I just say to them, I'm really sorry. I can't continue this conversation at the moment. I need to just have 5 minutes and I'll just go off and, do a bit of, box breathing, I think is what it's called. When you breathe in for 4, hold it for 4, breathe
Like a
out for 4,
secret
and then
weapon,
pause
that.
for 4. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So, so I go off and do that, and then I come back and I'm like, "Right, okay, let's carry on." Um, but you really have to put yourself first. Don't push yourself, because pushing yourself will only make it worse. You have to go, "No, actually, I just need 5 minutes for myself," and take yourself off and then come back and, be okay.
I feel it's like a treat
But
to
that's hard.
yourself. I honestly think it's a
Yeah.
treat to myself sometimes, even when and even when I'm feeling a little bit anxious, just 3 or 4 long, like you say,
Mm,
in, hold, and out, it
yeah.
resets my nervous system completely. It just sends some oxygen. Whether this is
Yeah.
clinically right, I don't know, but this is how I feel. It
Mm,
sends oxygen to my brain, and it just
yes.
lets me feel
Yeah.
in touch again.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was, my husband actually told me about it years ago when I was at my worst with anxiety, and I remember, and I couldn't sleep. I just couldn't sleep. And he says to me, "Right, come on." He said, we'll just lie here and we'll do this breathing." And it really helped massively. And then for months, I would have to do that every night when I went to bed because I couldn't sleep. And I used to concentrate on my stomach rising and falling, and just think about that. And then I used to be able to get off sleep then because of that. But it's, yeah, it's surprising how much that can help.
It's responsible for a lot. I know a lot of people who get
Mm,
restless leg as well when they go to bed, and their
yeah.
leg feels like it needs to burn off some energy or move or twitch in some way. And whilst that
Mm,
doesn't feel a
mm,
lot, it keeps people up all night.
yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
stress related. When you were at your lowest, is that the time you were talking about before, when you were at your lowest with anxiety?
Um, yeah, I think so. It was just, there was lots of things going on. So my mum was diagnosed with cancer, and we had stuff going on like with family, and my children were both, so I had one going through GCSEs and one doing A levels all
Hmm.
at the same time, and there was things going on at work, and it was just, I just, yeah, I was having a bit of a nightmare time, and my anxiety was absolutely horrendous, and I was being harassed by my boss at the time, because I ended up going off sick, and he kept with food poisoning, and he kept ringing me saying, "When are you coming back to work?" And I was like, "Can you just leave me alone?" It was just, it was just a constant. So much stuff going on, and I just wasn't sleeping. It was just awful. Um, but yeah, so it really did help. It really did help. But like menopause and everything else, I mean, life's crap anyway sometimes, and menopause just magnifies it all by about 100%.
Yeah. And
So,
the reason for this podcast, the reason you're here is because it is crap at sometimes. There are peaks and troughs. There are times where we do just want to hide away completely, and a time where people are trying to, like you say, come back to work, do this. But
mm,
you really need you.
mm,
They're trying to pull you out, and you're just not ready. You're
yeah,
incapable.
no, yeah, it's just, yeah, you like you say, I got actually at that point, I just wanted to hide, didn't want
Mm.
to talk to anybody, I didn't want to see anybody, I didn't want to leave my house, I didn't want to do anything, but I had to because there were things going on. But it was a really hard time. Couldn't talk to anybody on the phone, and I couldn't even reply to text messages at that point. I just, yeah, I mean, it was nice. People were texting me, and it did help me to know that people were thinking about me, but I didn't want to talk to any of them.
When you're going through something like that, and people are trying to pull you out of it, help you, tell you to reach out, this is a common theme of this podcast. You don't want to
Mm,
reach out because, for many reasons, you just haven't got the energy. And when people text you, sometimes,
mm,
yes, it helps to see they're doing it, but you feel like you're the only one going through it. And it's by sharing the stories like you're doing now, forward this podcast to whoever if you think they're going through, because to ask them if they're okay, it's a yes or no question. They either say, yes, I'm okay, and they're lying. They say no, and they feel as if they're going to be a burden. Ask that question if you want to, but it wouldn't have helped me. I wanted to see other people who were going through what I was going through so that I didn't feel so alone. And when you're in that patch, how did you get out? I know that time is of the essence sometimes. It almost can't be rushed, can it? You'll feel better when you feel better. What happened to you?
I just sat there one day and I just thought, I can't do this anymore. This can't be my life forevermore, and I have to work at sorting myself out. So I did have counselling, had a brilliant counsellor. And she really helped me. I spent most of the sessions just crying my eyes out.
Yep.
But that was obviously what I needed to do, So yeah, that really helps me. And the other thing, my mum had years and years ago, I don't know, 30 years ago, whatever. No, probably on about 40 years ago. My mum had suffered from depression, and she said it was like being in a big dark hole, and she couldn't get out of it. And all of those people saying, "Oh, pull yourself together and get on with it," and all this bit just made that hole deeper. And but she said to me, the only person who could get herself out of that, the only person the only person who can get themselves out of that is you. It's only you that can help yourself. And I watched my mum do it, and I watched her struggle and force herself to do stuff. And eventually, she always struggled a bit with depression after that, but never really as bad as that. And I just thought, Mum can do that. I can do that. And it was just small steps, so it was, I text someone back, and then a friend said, "Oh, can I ring you?" Yeah, okay. But I'm only talking to you for 5 minutes. I took the dog out on my own. I wouldn't talk to anybody. I was like, people were talking, and I was just going, yeah, and then carried on walking because I didn't want to talk to them. And then eventually I started talking to the other people who I'd got to know from walking the dog. And it was just things like, it took me a long time to go to a supermarket or, anywhere that was a bit crowded. And I'm anybody who knows me knows that I love going out for lunch. And so it took me an awful long time to go back out for lunch. Couldn't even do that. But it's just, it's really hard. But you have to do it yourself. You have to find your own way. And people can give you advice until they're blue in the face. You have to find out what works for you.
Really, listening to that was fantastic, because it's really starting small, isn't it? It's even opening the curtains or getting eye contact with someone when talking.
Yeah. Yeah. It was even like, I remember going in the kitchen. My husband's not the tidiest of people, drives me insane. And so the kitchen's always a mess. And I remember going in and like standing there and looking at the sink full of stuff and thinking, I'm going to do that. And I stood there and did the washing up. But then I had to go and sit down. But but it was but yeah, just little things like that. Because it becomes although it's anxiety, it is sort of rolled in with depression as well. It sort of becomes the same thing, doesn't it?
It's all rolled in with complete confusion as to what's happening as well, because all these things have labels. But what I think you said is as well, you only change when the fear of not changing is more than the fear of the actual change itself. Like you do almost get bored of that feeling. But like you said, it's really small steps, because the thought of going to the gym when you don't think anything of yourself, you don't think you should get any reward. You think what's happening to you must have been karma for a previous something you've done.
Yeah.
You've run out of good luck. You've had your lot. Things are never going to change. You look through life. You look through really dirty glasses at life. So people say, oh, it'll get better. You'll see the light. There's always hope. Well, there's not in these glasses. And this is my reality. So they're effectively lying, because all I want you to say is, I imagine looking through those glasses as you do, you think there's no hope, nothing's going to happen, it's never going to get any better. And that's validated. That's how you think now.
And do you know what actually really helped me was a friend of mine, and she does it quite, about lots of different things. And I think it's really nice. And she just said to me, I'm really sorry that you feel like this.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean?
It's nice,
she wasn't
isn't it?
apologising, but it was just it was really heartfelt, because she hated to see me like that. And that really touched me. I just thought that was really nice.
Someone not trying to pull you out into their world and getting, upset that you're not coming to lunch with them or something, but someone to come and sit in your darkness and just see what you're seeing for a bit. It's nice.
Yeah.
Right. So we are going to have you as a familiar face on this podcast, because there is a plethora, and you speak candidly and openly. And the amount of people that would have watched you today will be thinking, that's how I feel. We're not trying to teach people. We're not trying to tell people what's right. We're just saying how you feel is validated. That's it. Don't feel alone. You can hide if you want to, but there are others going through it, and, they are there as and when. We opened the show with a lady of a certain age, a woman of a certain age. Oh, that dread. And coupled with the menopause and everything else. What is it to feel invisible when all this is going on? Is it something like we realize how old we're getting? And it's a big reminder. Is it an insult, down and out, an insult because you're labeling? Is it a bit about self-esteem, about kind of holding a mirror to it, or is it just downright disrespectful?
It's I've always been quite outspoken. I'm never afraid to share my views. But and people would listen, they would go, oh yeah, that's a good idea, or whatever. But it was that when I said this to you the other day, but I was in a meeting about advertising something, an event that I was doing, and we had new people that were dealing with it, and they were all quite a bit, all lovely, but all quite a bit younger than me. And I said something, and I could see them rolling their eyes, and I just got that real, they think I don't know what I'm talking about, and they were going, oh yes, but we don't do it like this. We do it like this. And, and I'm saying to them, well, I get that, but that doesn't work. In this environment, that won't work. This is how I've done it. And I know that this works. And they wouldn't listen to me. And I just felt they're looking at me. I was the oldest person on that meeting as well. There was 6 of us. And they were, the next person down was easily 15 years younger than me. I've been in this organization for 35 years, and I just felt, and it was like, oh, I'm old. They just think I'm old and I don't know what I'm talking about and I'm irrelevant. Can I just say, actually, I was right, and I proved
Yes,
them.
you certainly can.
And I was right, and it was so lovely to go. I didn't actually say I told you so. I said I told you so without actually saying the words I told you so. That was a
Did you do
great
it by
moment,
doing
I've got
this?
to say. Yeah. I just went, oh, just to let you know that this has happened. And they was like, oh, really? And I went, So yeah, I did enjoy that moment very much. But it was just that, and I remember saying to someone afterwards, I felt so old in that meeting. I felt really like they just thought I was past it and I didn't have any relevance. And I wasn't used to that. I wasn't, because of the experience that I had, I was used to people going, oh yeah, oh, we'll ask her because she knows what she's talking about, or she'll have an idea or whatever. And they just didn't see that side of me. They didn't really know me, and they just thought I was irrelevant. and they didn't want to listen to a word I was saying.
It's a running theme with what you said through the menopause. Things that were working don't work now, like you said, about the memory or the vision or the and things where you were held in, and you are very much held in high regard still. But I'm talking about your own self-perception. When you were around that table, it wasn't the same regard in your eyes as you were held before. So something's happening. So there's
No.
almost a state of
Yeah.
confusion, shock. It's an attack on your esteem as
Yeah.
well, isn't it?
Yeah, it really knocked me. Really knocked me for 6 because I was like, but I do know what I'm talking about. And, you know, I know that perhaps that's not the way that you would do it, but I've worked in this environment for a very long time and I know what works and what doesn't work. And I had a, sorry, I was just going to say, not really sort of relevant, but I had a conversation with a boss who said to me, the thing is, Teresa, sometimes you think that you know everything or you think that you're always right. And I went to him, I said, I don't think that I am always right. I said, but in this situation, I have done this job for so long, I know that I am right. And I know that that comes across as arrogance, but it's not, it's just when you've done something for such a long time, you know, don't you?
Yeah.
You know what works and what
You
doesn't.
back
And to
yourself.
be disregarded, but to be disregarded without any discussion or thought, do you know what I mean? It's just like an automatic, she doesn't know what she's talking about.
It goes back
You
to
know,
that
that's
feeling
really
of
hard.
feeling
Yeah.
invisible again, which I think
Yeah.
many will relate to. So how do we
Yeah.
wrap something with so much content in? Your advice, not to make someone, actually, advice might be the wrong word. What might people like to be aware of when they're feeling invisible, when they're going through the menopause, when they're not sure what's happening and they're feeling fear and anxiety?
So I would say you're not on your own because there are so many women out there going through exactly the same thing. I would say see if there's some support group you could join, people that you could talk to that understand that are going through the same thing as you. Um, you know, if you are going somewhere like the GP or whatever, take someone with you. You know, if you've got friends that are similar age, you're all going to be going through the same thing. You know, everybody will experience it slightly differently, obviously. Surround yourself by people that understand, you know, and support each other and read up about it. You know, read so when you're going to the GP or whatever, you've got all your facts there. So you can fight for yourself, you know, you can say all those things. So yeah, I would say and counselling. Counselling was brilliant for me. Really, I've been to counselling at various times through my life for various reasons, and it's always worked really. It won't work for everybody, you know, but give it a go because you never know, it might work. So yeah, so find your tribe, if you like, you know, of women that are going through the same sort of thing. You know, bolster each other. You know, have someone that will fight your corner. Um, and you know, and realise that you're not the only person going through this. You're not going mad. You know, you've not got early onset dementia. It's menopause, and menopause is not very nice at all. It's a horrible thing, but we need to talk about it more and get it normalised. You know, that so when you say, "Oh yeah, I'm menopausal," people go, "Oh really? Oh dear," you know, that or not. Don't talk about that. You know, we need to talk about it more, get it out there.
Thank you. Yeah, I completely agree. And take the small wins, whether it's pulling the curtains, getting out of bed, putting the washing on, getting eye
Yeah,
contact with someone, going
absolutely.
out for a walk, going to the shop, whatever it is. Well done.
Yeah,
You're on the you're on the upward spiral as opposed to that fear downward spiral
yeah.
when you're not sure where the bottom is. So we have a
Mm.
lot to talk about in other episodes. Thank you very much, Teresa. Is there anything you'd like to add just before we wrap up? As I say, the purpose of this podcast is that when people feel in spiral, others can inspire all. We are not teaching and training, but we are simply letting people know that they feel a bit better knowing that they're not on this
Mm.
journey alone and they're not fearing what's coming
Yeah,
next. Others have trod the path and you're okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You will get through it. it just sometimes it can be a bit of a struggle. You just need to let other people help you if you can, and it you'll get there eventually, but you sometimes need a bit of assistance.
Teresa, thank you very much for now. Thank you ever so much. And I am sure we will see
No
you
problem.
again very soon.